It's got 4 sides to it with these points, and there's balls on top of the points. And it's just sitting there, stopped. He said it was in an open field, but the trees beside the field were going back and forth like it was a hurricane. He said it was just unbelievable. They were moving all over the place. And he
Wow.
said, and just like nothing happened at all, it's instantly over his head. And he's looking up, and this is the part where he says, and I don't want to even say this, but he said there was gold colored windows, like with the gold background. He says, and there was humanoids looking down at him.
Welcome back to another episode of the Expanded Knowledge Podcast. Today we have Martin Willis, who is the host of Podcast UFO, who has been interviewing UFO experts and experiencers since 2011. He's interviewed just about 600 guests. And if you go look at who he's talked to just about everyone who's everyone in the world of the UFO subject. So welcome, Martin. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Yeah, I appreciate it. And really, I'm looking forward to talking with you because you have spoken to basically 600 people. And how would you describe them? I mean, I know I said UFO experts or experiencers. Would you add anything to that? The kind of people you've spoken to?
Like you just said, people who I think some of the more fascinating people are the unknowns and the ones that have had like an encounter that's very strange, that type of thing. And it's actually probably more than 600 people because a number of times I'll have up to 3 guests, so. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's been a real fascinating ride so far, and you're just hearing the different things that have happened and the different theories of what could possibly be going on in our skies and our waters as well, not just skies. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, the waters. Yeah, right. What do you think about it all at this point?
It's you would think that after all these years I would say, well, I think it's this or that, but I it just keeps me going because I'm still really curious, and I kind of shy away from anyone that says they know exactly what's going on. So because I don't really think anyone really knows, and a lot of people think our government knows everything, but I just have a suspicion. It's not really based on anything solid, but I think the government knows, but it doesn't know everything. They know something. They know a lot more than they're revealing. That's pretty obvious, especially after some things just happened recently. It makes it blatantly obvious. But I don't think they know the full picture. And I don't know if we know where these things are coming from exactly, how they're getting here, what they want, and all those questions. It's really a profound mystery. I think probably one of the biggest mysteries we could ever solve.
Yeah, I agree. And so what do you think where is the evidence and everyone you've talked to and all the information that you've taken in your life so far? What are your best, ideas about the whole bigger picture, or what do you think is like the most important
Well,
takeaways you've had?
I should tell you about a talk I had with someone in the 1990s that long before I really got into the topic, long before I had my UFO sighting in 2007.
Mm,
Um, so I had an insurance broker at my house selling me a life insurance policy. I'm going to say around 1994 or something like that, where
okay.
thereabouts. And he was hanging out in the house after we got done all the paperwork, and he got the money from me, all that stuff, to get the thing rolling. And so he came up, and I don't know what he saw in my house. I have a lot of different paintings and things like that, but he said something about, oh yeah, I was in the war. I was in Vietnam. And I said, wow, that must have been really something as well. He said, I had a very unusual job. I said, oh, what can you talk about it? And he said, yeah, I can talk a little bit about it, but he said I was in a special segment of the Air Force that was studying UFOs because they were showing up during napalming and bombing and things like that. And he says, so we were really into that, trying to figure out that whole, what was going on. And then he started going into, yeah, they're really interested in our nukes too. There's a lot of situations, involving nukes, whether it's missiles or even nuclear power plants. And I'm listening and thinking, wow, this is really, really something. And then our conversation kind of went around a few other things, and then before he was ready to leave, I said, well, hey, one of the things I've always, would like to know in this type of situation, what does our government think they are? And he looks at me and he goes, they think we're a petri dish. And I never got over that. As years went by, I thought that was quite a thing to say.
The
Maybe,
government thinks we're a petri dish.
yeah, that we're being studied like a petri dish. So, and I do think that's actually a very good possibility. And I have tried to reach out and find this guy. And you would think an insurance broker, he owned his own company. He told me that same night that he was going to start doing tuna fishing. He bought a big boat and he was going to start chartering the boat. So I think he was getting out of insurance, but I can't find him alive or dead. No obituaries or anything. I just can't find him. And I'd love to have a conversation with him again since I started the show.
Wow.
Tom Bowden. I'll put the name out there. That's all I remember. Tom Bowden.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. That's a fascinating entry into getting more into it. That's such a great story. Have you seen people talk about what kind of contact may have been established between non-human intelligence and elements of the government, the military establishment, whatever we term it, because the term the government is kind of, it's a broad term. And when we're on this subject, it's really important when we understand like the nuances of how things, there's many different groups, there's intelligence agencies, this and that, private industry. Anything that you've come across about the best evidence or stories, I guess, even about direct contact?
Yeah, it's all anecdotal. That's the unfortunate thing. There's nothing really solid about that. There is this thing that went around for quite a while about Eisenhower having a meeting. I'm trying to think. Was it Maelstrom? Not Maelstrom.
Holloman, it's
Holloman.
Holloman,
That's
I
it.
think.
Yeah, and that's never been anything that can be confirmed. And so I don't know what I really think about that. I would like for there to be more, documents or evidence for that. I mean, then there's the MJ12 stuff that doesn't really hold up either. So I don't know if you know anything about that or read anything about the MJ12 documents. Now, I will tell you something pretty kind of interesting. I talked a lot with Stanton Friedman. He was really an icon in the UFO world. And he was, till the day he passed away, he was all into the MJ12, thinking they were, authentic. And I really respect him, but there's just so much against that in particular that I don't think they hold up. But anyway, I was at an auction gallery. That's kind of the business I'm in, is auctions, antiques, fine art, and I'm an appraiser as well. And I was at my friend's auction gallery in Massachusetts. And he goes, well, I know you're into UFOs. He says, let me show you something. He goes, I got this FBI's footlocker from Japan. He was stationed in Japan for, like 20 years. And so he opens the footlocker and it's just full of documents and letters and things like that, nothing that really makes sense. And then he pulls out this file of MJ12 files,
Wow.
the very same papers. So, I went out to the parking lot and I called Stanton Friedman. I said, I'm looking at these documents right out of an FBI's, agent's footlocker.
Yeah.
And, what it really boils down to is some people in the FBI probably got copies of this thing and, to look into, or if there was anything to it, or they might have even had like an interest in UFOs. and wanted to see them, that type of thing. So really can't. I mean, the guy had passed away. It was his estate. His family owned the all the papers and so many other things from Japan. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I don't think that those are real. But I don't. Getting back to your original question, I think if that would ever be revealed, there'd be a heck of a lot of explaining to do, because the rumor continues that that the supposed aliens will give us some technologies, like fiber optics and things like that. These are all rumors,
Right. Philip
In
Corso.
exchange, yes, in exchange that they are allowed to basically abduct and do, genetic work with humans.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the story, and I don't really think I don't think so, but I mean, I
Right.
can't rule it out 100%, but I don't think that ever really happened. I think that's the UFO field can be its own worst enemy. Sometimes they can perpetuate things that are off, that don't really make any sense, and I kind of go into why I don't believe in Bob Lazar. That's another situation. I really don't. I've done a lot of research on
Mm-hmm.
him, and there are some really good people out there, some solid people that back him up all the way. But I don't think so. I really don't.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, several things came up while you were sharing there. One is in terms of the documents, Majestic 12. I'll just share my 2 cents. It's an intriguing topic, and the fact that Stan Friedman, basically in the book I read by him, he had pretty much stated that he was almost conclusive that they were real. And it's interesting, but to me, in my own opinion, like it's not that important actually, if Majestic 12 existed or not. I've been doing research recently. I've actually been digging in pretty deep, as much as there is, into Project Sign, which was, the first official government
Yeah.
study, and looking at the paper trail of documents. Bruce Maccabee, you know who Bruce Maccabee is? I'm probably, yeah.
Oh yeah, he's been
Um,
on about 4 or 5 times. Yeah. Yeah.
oh man, yeah. He's a really there's a lot of these really good individuals and witnesses, and he's a huge one. And I only had seen him like once in a documentary once, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. A Navy optical physicist saying the
Yeah.
picture was real, saying this and that. Then I came across all his work, and he was the first one to get the FBI documents on UFOs, and lots of interesting stuff in there. They really were looking at the whole situation. So like that's a whole thing. But my point was that what I did notice and came across just reading actually yesterday about Project Sign was, it seems like there's pretty decent evidence that the phenomenon was, what was going on with it was kind of known and being handled with at the highest level before like the government and Project Sign and Project Blue Book and all that actually was like officially looking into it. Because in these memos, one's from like the Army, Air Force, and one's from the FBI, and they're going back and forth, and they're saying to each other like, and these are like colonels and even maybe a general, and they're saying lieutenant generals, and they're saying like the the phenomenon is not of interest to top brass. They're like, it's very strange, they're not like, they don't care about it, when in 1946, just a year earlier, with the Swedish ghost rockets, they were on top of it. And that's what this memo says. It's like they were like up our ass about it. And now this 47 sightings are happening. We have all of these Air Force majors and captains reporting this, and they don't care. And so, and then he says in the conclusion, he's like, based on this, I think there's a pretty good evidence that this is already known about at the top brass, and otherwise, why would they be acting like this? I thought that was interesting. Like maybe,
Yeah.
and
There's
not that that's Majestic 12, but I don't know. It's
Well, I think
interesting.
there really is something to that, because if you look at the what's called the Tic-tac case in 2004,
Mm,
off of California, off the California coast, Catalina, when they were saying, all these objects, when they were going to the top on the ship, the captain of the ship, they're saying, all these objects are, in the sky, they're only going at 60,000 feet, they're only moving at 100 knots, which, nothing can sustain flight really that we know about unless it was a helicopter, but not at 60,000 feet. So, especially at that slow speed. So, and then they would drop down to the water within a fraction of a second from the 60,000 feet. Huge G force, something like 1,300 Gs, or I don't know what it is, but really high. It would turn any occupant into mush, or
Yeah.
any equipment we have could not withstand the G's. We don't have
Right.
any, and it has to be like a real solid state type of equipment.
And they
So,
and they
but
knew that in 1947. That's the thing.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, there was a lot of documents of that. But what I'm saying is that, there was concern on the ship when they were seeing all this stuff, and you know,
mm,
we should get this up, to Washington, and blah like that. And it's no, 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 like not really concerned. And if I was running a ship, uh, and I knew these things were going on, I'd send people out right away, instantly, to see what the heck's going on. Which they did eventually, but it took them a long time, and there was only two times they went out to basically see what they were.
and you've spoken to military people that were
Yes,
part of that, right?
yeah. Kevin Day, he ran the um, the radar room on the USS Princeton that caught all that. And then also Gary Voorhees, he was in the Hawkeye, which is a radar plane that during exercise, but also during, any war uh, exercise. The Hawkeye stays above and watches everything that's going on, and it has some really really amazing radar detection. Excuse me. So they were detecting all of these things going on, and Gary Voorhees, basically said that when he returned to the uh, to the base, I mean to the when he returned to the Princeton. I'm
Hmm.
sorry, that's wrong. It was the aircraft carrier,
Nimitz.
not the Princeton, the Nimitz. Thank you.
Yeah.
Senior moment. So when they
It's all
returned to
right.
the Nimitz, that they took out the data bricks, and the data bricks each time, they were massive storage of all the data.
Yeah.
Each time they would put them in the safe.
Hmm.
Well, later on that evening, someone landed. I don't know how, by helicopter, I guess, from possibly the Air Force. It was a military personnel, and escorted with the captain down to the safe, and they removed those bricks and got on the helicopter and flew away. So this when
And you said it was an Air Force captain,
they think it was Air Force. It wasn't. The captain of the ship was there,
but they
and
couldn't.
whoever this
But they
military
oh,
person was,
they
they
couldn't
think it was
tell
Air
who it
Force
was.
by the what he was wearing, but he didn't have a uniform per se, some type of khakis or something.
And would they come in a helicopter?
I believe so. That's what he thought. Yep.
That's fascinating.
So they
That's
took
the
it
part
away.
of the
So
story
then,
you don't hear.
yeah, because you hear the head of Aero, Kirkpatrick, say that, oh, we're not going to look at the Nimitz case because we don't have any more data than you can see on the on YouTube. And that's absolutely BS. The data does exist for this, but they
Mm.
just, and that's such a good case. It's
Mm.
not just what they had, in video. There's so much, there's so many witnesses,
Yeah.
and so much data on that, on the Princeton, as well as, from the Hawkeye, and then the what were they, F-18s? I can't remember at that time, but anyway, they have had all the data,
Yeah.
and said there is none. So that's just kind of another situation where, are you really going to trust what they're saying when they say something like that?
And were you able to ask either of them who makes that decision to call in those people to come and get all that data and fly away the mysterious person?
Well, obviously, in my
Was it?
opinion, the
Uh-huh.
captain of the ship had to call it in, and that's their reaction.
It's his orders. He just goes up the chain to the next one,
Yep,
and then
that's what
okay.
I assume happened. Yeah.
That makes
But
sense.
it's strange when you hear. I've reached out to David Fravor, never had him on the show as
Mhm.
one of the pilots, and I've been communicating a little bit with Alex, who is also a pilot, Dietrich. So you don't hear the fact that they weren't debriefed and said don't ever talk about this, because so it's kind of strange. The whole thing is
Were
kind of
they
strange.
debriefed?
I don't really know. I haven't heard them say they were debriefed
Right.
in any type of way, but I would think there would be something.
I guess Fravor
Yeah,
did at least, right? He
yeah. I
must
don't
have
think he really talks
officially.
about. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
I was right there during the DC hearings this year,
Mm.
and I heard him talk, but I don't remember him talking about being debriefed or
Yeah.
told not to talk about
I
it. He
okay.
did say he
I
was
saw.
never hassled about it.
Okay. Yeah. I
There
saw.
you go.
Yeah. Right. That was an interesting. That was an interesting thing he said in that hearing. I saw on your channel that looked like you were there. How was that being at the
It
historic
was one
the
of the
UAP
highlights. Yeah,
conference?
I gotta say, it
Yeah.
was one of the highlights of doing this show. Is like my girlfriend's also my producer, and she's really into everything, and that's kind of how we met. Um,
Nice.
Started out as just a fan of the show, then we found out we were born on the same day and 1 hour apart, in the same hospital.
Mm.
I mean, the weirdest things. But anyway,
Wow.
so we got up one morning a few days before the hearing, and I looked, and my friend Chris Lito, who's a retired F-16 pilot and does a show on UFOs, he said, "I'm going
I
to the hearing."
discovered him recently. He
Yeah, he's
interviewed
a great guy. Yeah,
Mike Herrera, which is like
Herrera.
that interview is crazy. That's a good one.
It is really
Right.
crazy. Yeah, yeah. So, so anyway, I Chris said he lives in Portugal, and he's an expat and lives in Portugal. And he said,
Uh,
well, he's going to DC, and I'm saying, well, if you're going to DC, I'm going to DC. So we ended up hanging out together and did some shows together. It was a lot of fun, and I got there at 5:40 in the a.m. in the morning in line. Randall Nickerson, who did the Ariel phenomenon movie,
mm,
he he and I were having a conversation. He said he was going in. So it was 9 o'clock at night, and I'm talking. I said, "What time are you going to get there tomorrow morning?" He goes, "I'm here now. I'm staying here." I said, "Are you kidding?" So he stayed there the whole night. He was number one in line,
oh
and
wow.
so we got
Wow.
there at 5:40, and there was only 30 seats available. Over 1,000 people showed up, and
Wow.
people started cutting in line. Familiar faces in the UFO world started cutting in line. Um,
Wow.
And so I was number 13, uh, and Chris Lito was number 14 in the line. And we're thinking, are we going to get in? So it was a long wait, but it was really fun talking to all these people. A lot of fans of my show, recognized me and stuff. It was just a blast.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so we're waiting in line, and I look in front of me, and there was these people I didn't recognize, and I knew everybody in line. I
Yeah.
says, "Where did you come from?" And they said, "Oh, we've been here." I said, "I don't think so." So anyway, we were going to lose. We were not going to be able to get into the room because of those people, and I called them out to the person at the door, and so half of them took off scared, and
Wow.
that half made me the second to last person to get in the door. So
Wow.
Chris was the last person to get in. So
Wow.
yeah, that was a fascinating day.
That's
It
so
was really
cool.
historic. Yeah. So yeah, I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. I thought the questions were pretty were except for a couple of them, I thought they were really well thought out and really you could see bipartisan at work.
Hmm.
They were definitely all had an interest in it.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
was
I
really
I
great.
thought it was a success. I really did.
Yeah.
They asked the right questions to the point of like, let's cut through all the BS and where are they? Can you give us that? You know?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and where are the and Grusch is like, I know I have exact locations, but I can't say it in the
Yeah.
open hearing, which makes sense. And so now it's been that whole thing, and they don't get access to this GIF and this and that. And
Yeah. A lot of
you
dancing
know,
around. Yeah.
what do you think about the current state with the government's action on it? Obviously, just recently there was the NDAA went through and the UAP Disclosure Act, but they took out those critical parts. It's kind
They
of
sure did.
interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because on the one hand, it would have been nice to have all that as the bill was written, but on the other hand, people say, well, this is going to make more witnesses come forward now, and
Yeah.
it's, so I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and that may happen. I think it will, because they basically gutted everything. And my question right off the bat would be why gut it?
Hmm.
And one of the things was, if the private companies have hardware that was eminent domain, so we could see what these things are and all that. And of
Yeah,
course, the if they didn't have that, then they wouldn't have removed it
exactly.
from
Yeah.
you know so
That's
I mean, it
exactly
wouldn't
what
matter.
I
Yeah,
thought, and I, like, tried to find a reason, and I went down a rabbit hole because 'cause I'm like, "I gotta know what the reason is because this is almost the proof that they have something
yeah.
if they by taking it out, unless you have a good reason," and we can't get that information, at least as far as I can tell. Those debates and the conferencing for the NDAA, they happen in closed sessions, so, but the funny thing is, actually, one of my students' father, we were talking about this because I'm teaching a law class, and I brought up the NDAA and what's going on with that, and she was like, "Oh, my dad's really into this, and he is friends with one of the people on the that would have been a part of those debates,
Oh,
and
wow.
he's on, like, the Senate, or no, the House Intelligence or Armed Services Committee, one of those." And so he was there, probably a central part of it. And actually, I know he was because the House released this statement of who they nominated for the NDAA negotiations. So he was there, and he said he's spoken to him about UAP before, and he didn't even, like, know anything about it. He brought up the Nimitz incident, and he was like, "Hey, what do you
Hmm.
think about the UAP thing?" And this guy didn't even really have, like, any thoughts on it, and then it
Huh.
opened up his mind talking to my student's father. So I might actually try to see if I can get some info on what their reason is, but the press should be doing that, like, not
I
me
know.
behind the scenes.
It's not
Yeah.
really covered too much. Now, David Grusch, who, was the one who claimed that we have, basically crashed vehicles in our possession, which,
And
when he
bodies.
first said, what's that?
I was just gonna interject for a moment. Crashed vehicles, reverse engineering, bodies, and
Yeah,
that there's been a deliberate disinformation campaign to keep it from
yeah.
the public. And he even said that he became aware of certain agreements that were made. So that is in his testimony. But anyway, not to cut you off. So David Grusch, as you were saying.
Yeah. Um, so I when he first came out with that back in June, and
Hmm.
I know Ross Coldhart, who interviewed him, and um, so when I first heard that interview, it's like, wow, he's going way out there. That is, I mean, UFO reports and UFO data, but actually craft. He's actually going to say
Yeah, he
that,
went he went
So,
all the way. He left
yep,
nothing out.
yep. So it's funny. Yeah, when I saw my sister at at a lake like the day afterwards, at a cottage,
Hmm.
and I started bringing that up. If I talk about UFOs, she's like, oh, kind of interested. But as soon as I brought up the craft and stuff like that, I could see her eyes glaze over, and what's for dinner type of shit. Like it is a step that's pretty far.
Yeah,
But
that happened to me too. I can relate to that, like, because I
yeah,
couldn't help myself. Even my relatives, who I know are uncomfortable with the subject, I just couldn't help it
yeah,
because it was like, wow, can you believe this happened? Like, this is gonna change the world. And
yeah,
then, yeah, so I can relate.
yeah. So I personally think that he wouldn't risk it all and go out there and go through the whistleblower process the correct way. By the way, he did everything correct, and it
Yeah.
wasn't too long with right away where an article came out, kind of disparaging his credibility through his past problem he had with alcohol and depression and things like that, and PTSD and all that, which I think he's a human being, and he
Yeah.
admitted to all those things.
Right.
Um, and I got to meet him when I was in Washington. He's towering. He's really tall
Uh-huh.
and really big, genuine, big teddy bear type of guy.
Yeah. I've listened to him a lot at this point, like hours. I actually think that he's being genuine. People will theorize every single thing. I
Yeah.
definitely think that he's being genuine, and I think he's legit. I think he's like really trying to bring this forward, and I think it's worked so far, and it's going in the right direction, in my
Well, I have a
opinion.
way to communicate with him through Mike Herrera.
Yeah.
So they're talking to each other almost every day.
Mm,
So I have decided today that I'm going to reach out to him to tell him there is one thing that really bothers me,
okay.
and that is he's talked about this 1933 Italian UFO crash. That's been a proven hoax for years.
Mm,
But it's if you look at it from the surface, it looks like really there's documents, whatever. It looks real. But that I know people have done some deep research. Kevin Randall and
wow.
that is a hoax. So that makes me think that he's being fed some things. Now
Right.
I'm hoping it's not everything, but that in particular almost seems like a disinformation tactic. Like someone
Right.
would want to hurt his credibility. Let's throw this in there and give
Mm,
them this information. You tell him, since he's coming out anyway, that type of thing. So
right.
I think he's really, that bothers me. And luckily, I can get to him, through Mike and tell him, at least caution him on that and to really look into it. Because I mean, I don't consider yeah, I don't think he's a gullible person, but I do think that he probably believes in the people that has been telling him these things,
Mhm.
and not all their best, not all of them have really good intentions,
Mm,
especially after they knew that he was going to be coming out.
mm. So you think that he probably got a mixed bag of data, but it
Yeah,
was still enough, I guess, for the inspector general to look at it all and basically vet it and the witnesses for like 8, 16 months, right? And then still go,
yeah, and
okay,
they said
you
and
can
say
come out
this
and
is
say
an
this,
urgent matter.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
So it seems like I get that, and that's actually a really important point you bring up. Um, and I get that, but I think like the basics of it is legit in the
hmm
sense that I feel like he really did blow the whistle, and it's not, at least him knowingly is not part of some other kind of operation, which is still always, it's always possible, but what can we do? We just have to like make the best thing we're going to believe in it with the limited information that we have,
right.
because there's a lot of information that we don't have access to. So
So
yeah.
I got to tell you a story, if I could, about one of the people that I hosted.
Love stories. Yeah.
So I don't know, about 3 years ago, this person contacted me, a listener to my show, and he said, "Hey, I know someone who was in the military, and their troop, came upon a crashed UFO in Peru, and but he doesn't want to talk to anyone about it. But I'll ask him if he'll talk to you about it." And so I
Mm,
said, "Yeah, that sounds interesting. Sure. Is there any documented or anything?" And he says, "Yeah." He sent me a 2001 interview of him. This happened in 1997,
mm,
and Stephen Greer. I'm not going to say too much about Stephen Greer. He used to be really good though,
yeah.
years ago, and he was actually working with Leslie Kane and James Fox, and they were interviewing people in New York, and so they interviewed him back in 2001. And I would, like I said, I was sent the interview, and I went, "Wow, this is really, quite an amazing story."
Right.
And I talked to James Fox about him, and James Fox said, of all the people they were interviewing on that whole period of time, this guy was 100% credible. And so it's quite a story. His name is Jonathan Weygandt. So David Grusch comes out in June, and I hear back from the listener, and he said, "Perfect timing. David Grusch is coming out talking about these craft and everything, and I think it's time to reach out to Jonathan and say you can be on the show, to talk about it." So he connected me, and I drove up. I have a place in the winter in South Carolina. He lives in North Carolina, so I drove up and spoke with him 5 hours each way, and had dinner and stayed overnight up there, and then came back. By the end of the dinner, he said, "Yeah, I'll be on your show." So, and we would
Wow.
talk for hours on the phone, just hours, and hardly ever talk about the incident. But I knew, the time would come when I'd be interviewing him.
Yeah.
So I finally got there the day to interview him. Now he felt very comfortable around my producer girlfriend, Donna. So,
Hmm.
uh, he always say, "Is Donna coming?" And, but all this stuff. So we go to set up the interview. I have him in the room, and I set up my lights, and he goes, "No, no, no, no. I don't want the lights shining on me."
Mm.
And I said, "Well, I got to have some lights." And I said, "Okay, I'll back it up later." So I backed it up. And then he goes, "Donna's staying here?" And I said, "No, no, she's going to the room. I rented a little conference room. She's going
Uh-huh.
to the room." Yeah, oh, well, I found out later that he wanted Donna to do the interview. And I guess it's because he was so traumatized by this situation
Yeah.
that um, he felt like he was being interrogated. Now, the very first thing I asked him, so can you tell the listeners, why, basically thinking he's going to talk about David Grusch coming out with everything. Said, can you basically tell the listeners why you feel it's time to talk about this? And he looks right at me. He goes, "You asked me to." So he doesn't pay any attention to David Grusch, anything that's going on. All he knows is what happened to him in 1997.
Right.
So now they're connected, and but he still has no clue to who David Grusch really is. And, but they're connected through Mike Herrera, uh, and David Grusch wrote the other day, he checked with his sources, and that incident definitely happened in Peru in 1997. So basically what it is they were called out. They were part of this thing called Operation Laser Strike in Peru. And that was basically to catch drug runners. And so
Mm.
they would look for friendly aircraft or, drug smuggling and all that. So they
Hmm.
knew that a craft went down. And I believe that one of the things they would do is shoot a craft down if they avoided it. So
Uh-huh.
I know that did happen with a private plane by error, a few years later.
Okay.
So they were, I don't know whether they shot it down or whatever, but they said, they think it might be friendly. They don't really know. So they
Hmm.
gave him the location, and he leaves with three Hummers, and they drive for about 5 hours in the Amazon. And
Nice. 3 Hummers going through the Amazon for 5
yeah,
hours.
yeah,
Love it.
through roads, but then they have
Yeah.
to walk in, and there's I don't know how many are with him total, but he's on point. He's in three, two sergeants and him are, going to the location while everyone else stayed back.
Mhm.
And so he walks up to this thing, and he first of all he sees like someone took a butter knife to the woods. It's all like parted. It looks like a very unusual crash or whatever it was. The trees are topped and all
Uh-huh.
that. And so then they see this thing. He has to come up on this ridge, and it's wedged right into some rocks. And it's like an egg shaped craft. And he says some
Mhm.
things that I've never heard before. First
Mhm.
of all, he's walking up to it, and the whole craft is changing colors, like the rainbow of like a chemical rainbow. That those like if you have a bubbles on your soap when you're washing your car, that type of rainbow type of situation. It's changing colors constantly. There's
Wow.
fluid running out of it all over the place, and there's damage to it, like it was hit by a missile or something. And the fluid is running out, and the fluid is changing colors. And he comes up upon it, and he walks up. The other two sergeants are down. And he walks up, and he sees a hand sticking out with
Mhm.
like four fingers. And he all of a sudden, I know this gets really, really crazy. And I have to say, this is one of the stories where I have to say that I actually believe the guy. He starts getting
Okay.
messages in his head, like something like, and he knows that they're dying. These beings, whatever they are dying, and he's like traumatized.
Wow.
All of a sudden, he starts hearing noise and like some type of chaos going on, and
Mhm.
turns around, and there's all these guys in black fatigue with U.S. military weapons, and they have no insignia at all, and they come right up to him and they're pushing him around, and like, I guess they asked him to relinquish his weapon. Now I don't know if that's, I don't know if that's, he never said that to me, but I'm guessing that's what happened, because they basically interrogated him. He, for some reason, thinks they're from the Department of Energy. I don't know where he came up with that.
Mm,
But he's a very, very intelligent guy. I mean, after all
mm,
these conversations I had with him, he's really quite amazing. I'm surprised he didn't
wow.
raise way up in the ranks. So he was taken away in a helicopter, and he was threatened that, you ever talk about this, we know we can just toss you out the helicopter right now, and you'll just be missing, that type of thing. So they really
Right.
threatened him. And so he was about 2 weeks. He was in shackles for about 24 hours and being interrogated. And
Hmm.
then he got sent back to the States. And then he got discredited in all different types of ways because he said he was going to talk about it. So he talked about it one time in 2001. They did the interview. He said some things happened again, and he didn't want to talk about it again, and kind of like tries to forget about the whole situation. He had a bunch of health issues and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then, when he talked about it, only the second time it was on my recording. Um, the only two times, I don't think he's ever going to do it again. And
Wow.
he was really, really upset when you were bringing it up. And when I made him go into details, you could just see it in his face. He was
Wow.
not, it really, really bothered him. And, said he has nightmares and things like that. So, anyway, it put a lot of
Wow.
stress on him. And for the fact that, for so many facts, he's never gained a penny. He's never wanted to. He's never, he just wanted, he talked about it because he really liked Donna. That's basically it. Like and she would have been a good
Nice.
a good person to interview him. But anyway, so that was quite an extraordinary interview I had with him. But I'll tell you what, it was like pulling teeth, because he said I said that in the first interview. Like he didn't, it was like I was
Mm,
really hard. He didn't want to talk about.
yeah.
I was like, at one time I was thinking, why are we even doing this? And so I cut it short to 30 minutes, and did some
Gotcha.
editing. Yeah.
Right.
But he's had
So what?
a lot of people reached out to me, including some publications that want to interview him and stuff like that. And he just said, nope, I don't trust anyone. And then what about going to the government and talking about it in a whistleblower situation? Nope, I don't trust the government. Not going to do
Mm,
it.
mm,
So, yeah. So I feel for the guy.
yeah. Imagine being in that situation and you just don't want to die one way or another. So
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
even going through to the government, I can understand why he wouldn't trust that either. I wish he
Like,
would, but the thing
yeah,
is like we need the people that have the hard evidence. I don't know if he does have it, but like
no, he
what
thinks
are
they
they
went
going to do
there.
with that
He
with the
thinks because
testimony?
of the way
Yeah.
that thing was so hidden in the jungle and everything, he thinks
Hmm.
they were just interested in the biologicals. But that's his own opinion. He said he doesn't know for sure. But it would be
So
impossible to get out of there
right, so
where it
they
was.
weren't interested necessarily in harvesting the hardware or the craft.
I
Not
think they would be, but
well, yeah. Okay.
so I did ask him. I said,
Somebody
"Did you
needs to
get?"
go out and try to find some ruins there. If you hear
Yeah,
that.
actually, he has the coordinates. He jotted it down, and he still has
All
them.
right.
And he has been looking. I asked him if he could find them because I have someone, a listener of the show, that is in that area, and they said that they would love to, go check out to see what they could find. So I did ask him in this interview. I said, "Is there anything positive that you got out of this whole encounter?" And he goes, "That I'm still alive."
Hmm.
That's what he said. That was the positive. So
Interesting.
yeah,
I've seen a lot of stories of people that have seemed to come up, and it's a little bit of a pattern. Is a lot of people who've had an experience like that, or seen or been close to a UFO like that, will report like in some cases healing, in some cases like this thing that changes them the rest of their life, just like more of a spiritual opening or something. Have you?
yeah.
seen
Oh
that?
yeah,
Or
yeah. Not for his particular case. Not for
but
his
nothing
particular.
for him. It was just
Nope,
that he was
nothing,
still
nothing
okay.
positive for him at all. Yeah, but there are many times I've talked to people who have said, similar things that of what you're saying. Yes, but there are some also people that said they've had some sicknesses. I had another really great incident that I talked to that's been one of my most popular downloads. Would you like me to get into that one? It's
Uh,
fascinating. Or you want to go in a different way?
yes, I think I can remember the other things I want to come back to. At least the one
Okay.
big one. But
Yeah.
who is it that you want to talk, or you were going to talk about?
Well, yeah, he's like one of these superhuman. He's a underwater person. He spent 15,000 hours underwater. In subs and diving.
Wow.
He's done more.
Navy?
He was in the. It's so funny. He was in the Navy and he switched to the Army to do the diving, which doesn't seem like it makes any sense. But he's had more hours of rebreathers and rescue than any Navy SEAL has.
Okay.
So he's done all types of rescue operations and things like that in the Army. But now he's private, and as he was private in a sub, and he's done a lot of filming of Humboldt squid. They're about 6 feet long, and they try to eat you. You're part of the food chain when you're near them. And he had his hand broken and all kinds of things by one. But he was diving, and while he was diving, something caught his eye. He was in a rebreather, and he was trying to film some bass mating something or
Do you know
something. He was
where?
trying to get. Hmm?
Do you
Yes,
know
he was
where?
off of the coast of Mexico.
Okay.
And he is the first person to ever film a giant squid in the wild. He is
Wow.
the first person. You can look him up that way. So a lot of
What's
stuff
his
on
name?
Wikipedia and YouTube. Scott Cassell.
Scott
That's
Cassell. Okay, yeah.
Cassell. So something caught his eye, and he looks over to this bright object that's almost like a gold, but it's probably reflection. And
Hmm.
there's a cube, just there. And so he looks at it and it's kind of toward I think he said he was in, I forget how many 100 feet of water, a couple 100 feet or something like that. So the thing starts to move, so he starts to go after it, and when he stops, it stops. And then he's trying to film it the whole time, but never even thinking about turning off his lights. His lights
Wow.
are like, it's they're reflecting right off of it. And he can't. He looked at the film afterwards and he was really upset that he didn't just turn off the lights and stop the reflection. It's really, really hard to see this thing in the film. So he said, then he goes all the way to the bottom, and the thing was reacting to everything he did, and there
Mm.
was no water movement. This is the weird thing they say about
Wow.
a lot of these USO type things. They don't disperse water. So he
Wow.
said, well, I've been next to a whale many times when it just takes off, and when you
Hmm.
do, you spin around, because of the water current. He said this thing just
Wow.
took off right when it was right near him. It just took off, and he said nothing, felt nothing, not even the slightest thing. Then he started having health problems within a month, many, many
Mm.
health problems. So
Mm.
he was on my show. He was such a fascinating guest that I'm trying to think of all the TV studios that wrote me, from the History Channel, Discovery Channel, um, Admiral Gaulladet, who is someone I had on my show. He's into the topic, and he's
Yeah.
had all these people that he said that it was the most amazing thing to actually talk about it, and he wanted to talk. He lost a sponsor. He had a major sponsor of his exploration, and as soon as he decided he felt comfortable with one day, it was a European guy, and he started. Well, this did happen to me, and I don't know what it was, but as soon as he talked about it, the guy pulled all his funding, and
Wow.
which is same shame. So he suffered a lot from, basically because of the ridicule of the topic. He never said it was, otherworldly or anything. It's just like he had no clue of what it was, you know. And
Yeah.
but fascinating. That was one of my very favorite interviews I've
Wow.
done in all the years I've done one. So
And I mean, do you know if he reported it to whoever was he in during service when he had the sighting?
No, this was when he was a freelance on his own and
Okay.
selling his. Basically, what he would do is sell his video to, National Geographic and many other, uh, you know, places that would buy that type of thing. Photographs too,
That's
but I
cool.
mean, of great white sharks, like he'd hit them in the nozzle, stuff like that, where they get a really good picture of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's fearless guy.
That's
Amazing.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's definitely something going on under the water. So many sightings
yeah.
and coming out of the water, going in, this and that. And also, it's funny when I watched that 2022 hearing, the UAP task
Hmm.
force. Um,
Oh yeah,
I watched the whole thing and I was just sitting there, and that moment jumped out to me when that one guy Moultrie, he like grinned and he was like, "We're very interested in what's going on in the deep sea domain," you know. And I was kind of like, "Yeah, they know that there's some crazy stuff going on there." So
yeah.
yeah, I wanted to actually, that story is fascinating. I wanted to ask you if you could kind of just go through the most interesting stories that you've heard.
Yeah. That I will say that I do believe Scott is probably the most interesting
Okay.
story that I've heard
Nice.
but I have heard some really, really amazing stories on these one-off encounters. And uh, so I just have to tell this story because it's so great. This guy's name is Albert Wayne. And I put out there to my listeners, hey, if you listen to the show and you had an unusual encounter of some kind, let me know and I'll talk to you on the phone. And if I think, it's interesting, I'll record it and whatever. So this is
Mhm.
on my YouTube channel under Albert Wayne, Wain. And great guy, extremely credible, uh, really pleasant to talk to, well spoken. So he talks about back in 1978, he was on his way from Massachusetts down to Studio 54, which is this crazy studio in New York City that was open, I think, 24 hours. Uh,
Mm.
there's actually a Netflix story on it now, I think, about uh, how that all went into bankruptcy and drugs and all that stuff. But anyway, he was on his way with his girlfriend down to Studio 54,
Mhm.
and he's somewhere in Connecticut. He's on I-95, and all of a sudden he sees this light, and he says to his girlfriend, "Looks like this plane is going to crash. And the plane's like coming down, like a big headlight." And so they slow down a little bit, and all of a sudden, like right in the field next to them, this craft is just sitting there. So he pulls over and he notices a whole bunch of other people pulling over too. So they all pull over on the side of the road, a whole bunch of people off 95. And that's a
Mhm.
busy road. So I don't know about how many there were, maybe 10 cars or something like that. They're all watching this. And he says it's very, very unusual shape. It's got four sides to it with these points, and there's balls on top of the points. And it's just sitting there, stopped,
Mm.
and across the field, across the highway, the other side of the highway. And he said it was in an open field, but the trees beside the field were going back and forth like it was a hurricane. He said it was just unbelievable. They were moving all over the place. And he
Wow.
said, and just like nothing happened at all, it's instantly over his head. And they're looking, he said, it's not even like a split second. It was just there. It's just like it was there. They didn't see it move.
Wow.
It was just there. And he's looking up, and this is the part where he says, and I don't want to even say this, but he said there was gold colored windows, like with the gold background. He says, and there was humanoids
Mm.
looking down at him, and he's like,
Wow.
he's looking up, and he doesn't believe what he sees, and his girlfriend and him are just in awe, looking up in it. And then another thing he was having a hard time even saying, he says, all of a sudden, he said he just felt like there was a voice in his head that says, "Don't worry, we're just looking. We're not going to bother you. Don't worry." And so um,
Mm.
there's a reason I'm getting to this story because I think it's fantastic. So uh, all of a sudden, just like it was never there, it was exactly in the same position it was over the field. And
Uh-huh.
the trees are going back and forth again, like that.
Wow.
And then they're staring at it, not saying a thing, and then all of a sudden it just goes off, and then he said just shoots right out of sight instantly. It goes
Wow.
down to like a little pin, it's gone. So he looks over to his girlfriend and he said, "Why don't we get an ice cream?" This is the bizarre part. So she said, "Yeah, okay." So so they drive along. The cars all start driving along all together. There's some in front of them, some in back of them.
Uh-huh.
So they pull over at the first exit. Everybody pulls over the first exit. They all stop at a Howard Johnson's. They all go in to get ice cream. All the cars.
Really?
Is that bizarre or what? So he sees a guy staring straight ahead at the counter, and he said at the time it was an old guy, maybe 30. He says he's staring straight ahead and just like, and he looks over at him and he goes, "Did you see them? Did you see them?"
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah. That was one of the most fantastic, really interesting stories that I've heard. Just an amazing encounter. And
Yeah.
I guess they want
Imagine
us to
being
eat
there.
ice cream. Yeah.
Right. Imagine being there. And that's the thing. Like, it's easy for people to discount stories like that. But because it's can be a matter of seconds sometimes, even my own. And
Hmm.
my wife, I love her. She's very open minded, she's very intelligent, all that. But she doesn't really believe me. And I'm like, wow,
Oh,
yeah, that's how crazy it is. I know. I was on top of a mountain, very simple thing. I was watching the skies. There's lots of airplanes. I'm looking, and then it literally was only 2 seconds, but I saw something moving, like at the same altitude as one of those airplanes that you can like clearly track. It was a clear
mm,
day, just
mm.
a few clouds in the sky, and I saw it, and I'm like, oh, what is that? And like just enough time for my brain to look, see the shape, see the color, and then I'm like, oh, that's not a plane, and then to be like, I want to see where this goes, and then it just disappeared. You know,
Mm.
it went almost behind a cloud, and then it was gone. And yeah, it was something flying, and now I can
Mm.
really understand the unidentified flying object term in the saucer, because it was a grayish color, and it was a disc shape, and
Wow.
I saw it, and it was 2 seconds,
Yep.
and nobody would ever believe me. And there happened to be a guy hiking on the hill with his dog, and I was like, you know what? No one's ever gonna believe me. I just saw this, and I was like, hey man, I just got to tell you that I just saw like a disc, like a flying disc, for like 2 seconds, and it was definitely there though. And he happened to be this really open minded, cool guy, and he was like, oh yeah, well yeah, we know that like they're here and all that, and so
Yeah.
or that they're real or whatever. So it was a funny little story. But yeah, my only point to what you shared was that it's easy to discount people, and I can know that firsthand. And then I had another sighting too, but I actually had two friends there. It was an orb
Mm.
sighting. We were
Mm-hmm.
deep in the Adirondack Mountains, and you can look out and see nothing. There was no houses or lights. It was really, you see the peaks in the background, it's huge expanse, and we're on top like 5,000 feet up,
Mm.
and we're camping there for the night. And it's still light out though. It's like a little bit before dusk, and I just see the bright light, and then to my two friends, I'm like, "Is that a star already?" You know, so that's how bright it was. And I was like, "Cause like the sun's literally not even like really down," and I'm like, "That would be crazy, like a planet." And then my friends look, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's actually coming closer," and it hadn't registered to me yet. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, it is." And then this shining orb, floats in the valley, right?
Mm.
And there's like, so I'm like, we're all just taking this in, and I'm like, all right, well, it's something, and then we're watching it, and I'm a little bit actually honestly nervous, because I'm like feeling like that it's something
Mm.
intelligent, and I'm like, oh shit, we're like vulnerable, like we're out here in the middle of nowhere.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm a little bit like on edge for a couple seconds, and then we're all watching it, and then disappear, gone. And we all just started laughing, because we're like, oh shit, we just saw that. Like, we saw a
How did it
UFO.
disappear? Did it? Did you see it move?
No,
Did
just
it shoot
vanished.
off or just gone? Yeah. There's
Instant
a lot of people
vanishing.
that
Yeah.
say that, like it'll be there and then it's not. That type of thing. What color
Mm.
was it?
It was like just a color of like a star in the sky,
Oh, okay.
that
So it was
that kind
sort
of
of like a
shining
whitish. Yep.
white.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Uh-huh. Yeah. No, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that report those. As a matter of fact, I think that's probably one of the most reported, are basically lights in the sky or orbs. Either one. A lot of times they'll be different colors. Orange. There's orange orbs are pretty popular. That's kind of funny, but
Wow.
I've talked to a pilot. He was an Air Force pilot, but he was
Mm.
also a American Airlines captain. He was deadheading, and the article in the New
What's
York Times.
deadheading?
Oh, I'm
Oh, he
sorry,
was going.
deadheading.
He was going to a
Yeah, he was in
Grateful
civilian
Dead
clothes.
concert.
He was just.
Okay, I didn't know if that was like a military
Yeah,
term.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah. No,
I'm not
deadheading.
deadheading.
I'm sorry. I used to. I was flying for a while, so I know all this stuff. Deadheading is when you're going to a different location, and you're just riding on the airplane. Like you're going to your base. So,
Okay.
like he might be based out of Boston, which I think he was, and he was in San Francisco. So he just jumps on and just takes the ride. So
Okay.
he was sitting next to me, and he was talking about being an F-16 pilot. Now he's a captain for American Airlines. So I said, "Hey, did you?" Uh, he was a Navy pilot. That's right. So I said, "Hey, did you see the New York Times article about UFOs and the Navy pilots and all that?" And he said, "No, no, I don't follow any of that stuff." But he goes, "But they do exist." So I said, "Oh, yeah. What do you mean they exist?" And he said he was somewhere in the Midwest, and they were relocating a F-16, and he was, or whatever. I think he said an F-16, and he had a what's called a WESO weapons operator in the back, and it was just him and this other guy, and they had several hundred miles to go, and
Wow.
he said all of a sudden this green orb just showed up, and it went by his wingtip, and he said in his WESO the guy behind him was sleeping. Now I've heard that you never, no matter what, they're never supposed to let them sleep. But according
Wow.
to him, he was sleeping. And so he left him alone, basically. I didn't wake him up. But he said it was about 200 or 300 miles this thing was tailing him. And it was so bright that it lit up the entire cockpit. And then he says, and then all of a sudden it just shot off. So I asked him to be a guest on my show, and he wouldn't even come on anonymously. He said, "Nope, I'm never going to talk about it. Any type of
Wow.
public forum." Yeah. He was
Wow.
afraid for his job. And that's what the stigma has done for many people. They don't want to talk about it because they're afraid it will affect their job. And I believe it affected what I was doing at one time, doing my show, the show on UFOs.
Mhm.
Um, I don't need to get into that, but I do believe that it caused a problem one time.
Mm. Gotcha.
So, hmm.
What has Tim Gaulladet shared with you? Because he's pretty high up in the Navy, right? Or he's retired now, or is he still active?
Yeah, he's retired. He's
Yeah.
a rear admiral. He was really interesting. I had him on about 3 or 4 months ago, maybe. Actually, I had him. We were to meet up in D.C. at the hearing, and somehow I missed him. He was one of the people that cut in line in front of me, and I missed him. But great guy, very solid. I'm really glad someone like him is taking this subject seriously, and he has connected with Scott Cassell, the person I was talking about, and they're going to be
Mhm.
doing something together. Uh, but I think he's an asset. But he doesn't have anything firsthand to share,
Okay.
basically, but just
Okay.
the fact that he knows that there's something happening. And I also connected him to a friend who was on a Navy submarine when there was something going at 200 knots underwater, many years ago, and we didn't have anything. No one had anything at the time that would do that. Now they have something that can go well over 100, I believe, underwater, but
Mm.
they seem to know it was on a test run on a Navy submarine. He was invited to go as a contractor, and he said that the people seemed to know about it, like they logged it and dogged it, and no one was to talk about it. And someone mentioned fast mover, I think they called it a fast mover. So
Yeah.
200 knots underwater.
That sounds like is that because I actually just went to a conference in Connecticut nearby me, and Marc or Mike D'Antonio.
That's who it is.
Yeah, it sounds like the
He's a
same
friend.
story, and I'm
Yeah, it's
like,
the same
wow.
story. Yeah,
His
yeah,
presentation was fascinating, man. Like there were so many different angles that he was looking at things
yeah,
with, and
yeah.
some new information. I was like, wow, yeah.
He's a good
I
friend, and
I
I
actually
can get
emailed
you to.
him. I tried, but I don't think I had the best email. I asked him after the conference, but he never got back to me to do an episode podcast.
I'll set it up. He and I are
Nice,
good
that would be
friends.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, he had some
yeah,
fascinating ideas, man. It was and some firsthand experiences like that, and I was like,
yeah,
wow. And he's
yeah.
worked on some serious stuff. Like he's worked on
Yeah,
classified projects in the Navy and stuff like that. He was saying
yeah,
it's
yeah.
pretty
He's
interesting.
a great guy too. Yeah,
Nice. Yeah, he was funny. That's what I loved about it. The
yeah.
presentation
He's very
was
quirky. He's got his own sense of humor, and it's great. I love his sense of humor. Yeah.
yeah, me too. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
funny.
I have this running joke with my producer that he's just waiting by his computer for me to send him something like, "Hey, Mark, what do you think about this?" Because he always seems like he fires right back. Oh no, that's and he's really
yeah,
good at what he does as far as what the visuals are that people see,
yeah.
whether they're photographs or
He gave his
videos.
right. He gave his theory on how he thinks UFOs work, like
Oh,
technologically, and it was he put it in such a good way that I feel like I can comprehend the basics. Like there could be many different variations of this but like his, basic idea was fascinating. And
was it
so
the
yeah,
one where there's these highways, like they have these highways through space that are mapped out,
he
and they use the
he
same?
didn't talk about that. That sounds fascinating. He just talked about like
Yeah.
the craft itself and how it would be like a particle accelerator creating like the bubble around it that would basically like manipulate space time and or actually his model was like it goes into the fifth dimension or another dimension and then it comes back into our
Yeah.
four
Yeah, I've heard the
dimensions,
talk.
and that's why
Yeah.
it's like it's just going in and out, and that's why it looks like it's going super fast, but that's just because it's punching in and out of the fifth dimension.
Yeah.
It made a lot of sense. It like explained a lot of all the reportings from all these years, like everything kind of checked the box as. But
Yeah.
anyway, it was cool.
No,
He was fascinating.
it it kind of makes sense in that propulsion, and it's not unlike things that you've heard that almost sound interdimensional.
Hmm.
The things the different people like for instance, the Ariel phenomenon, the that movie. One of the people that was not in it, but a witness that I got to talk to, his name was Francis Cheramuga. He lives in Madagascar. Real cool guy, real nice guy. And
Yeah,
he
and
was at that incident back in 1994 as a kid at the Ariel school when the craft landed.
wow,
Excuse me, and people saw beings, basically get out. And one, Selma Siddick, who I interviewed, actually claimed she was only 4 feet away from it. Skin looked like porcelain. It was unlike anything, expressionless face, big black eyes.
wow.
But he was saying that this being that he was watching would sort of run toward the pool. There was a pool there from
Hmm.
where he was at, but he wouldn't see the legs move, but it would like skip in and out of his existence. Like it was here, I'm going to try, and then it was like all of a sudden here, and then here, and then here, and stopping like that. What a bizarre way to describe something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sounds like punching in and out of the of
yeah,
dimensions.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's such a mystery, and some of these cases are just really amazing. I mean, that in particular, they say 65 school children, but it was a lot more. It's just that they couldn't interview the ones that were younger, like in a sub-primary level that were there. So kids 5 and under were there. There was a lot of them, and they were never interviewed. And I don't know if there's any interviews with them now out there as adults. But yeah, it's an interesting case. Someone's looking into this. The
I
Ariel incident is fascinating.
Oh, I think it's one of the best cases, and I haven't even. It's like on my bookmark to really learn it and go into it, but I'm like just on the surface. I'm like, wow, that one is because some academic did at the time, right? Didn't he do like a
Yeah,
huge
John
study
Mack.
on it? Yeah, and it
Yep.
was like super legitimate, and it was like, wow, these kids really just all experienced that. So
He was a
yeah.
uh, he was a child psychologist, a Harvard professor. John Mack was his name, and he was there a few weeks after the incident. And he has a really lovely way of interviewing the kids. He gets down on their level, doesn't lead them. He asks them, questions. How did that make you feel? Did you hear something? What did you hear? He never leads them at all, and
Hmm.
they trust him. And I've heard people say, in other interviews now today that he was like the only one that they really trusted to talk to. There was a guy there right away from the BBC, great guy. Leach is Tim Leach, I think it is. He was there
Hmm.
right away and interviewed the kids, and he was a war reporter, and he was used to going into battle lines and all that. And he said, but he was never prepared for talking to kids about what they were talking about.
Mm.
And he said you can just see it in their faces. They're not making this up, and
Wow,
it really changed his whole world outlook after
wow,
he interviewed them. So
and
yeah,
I
that's a really good case.
and that's what I think's really cool about your show, which I've only recently discovered, and I have like so many episodes saved for later. But I noticed that. I noticed you had witnesses to that, right? I mean,
Yeah,
they're
Selma
like
Siddick.
adults now. It's cool.
Yep, Selma Siddick is very, very well spoken, and she's the one that I would suggest to listen to if someone's interested in it. She talks about being only 4 feet away. Uh, the most spoiler alert, the most fascinating part of her story, I believe, is when she tried to break away to see if her siblings were okay. She was concerned about them, and
Hmm.
she said one of the hardest things she ever did in her life was to break the stare. She had eyes locked with this thing 4 feet away from her, and for
Wow,
her to like break away from that was one of the hardest things she ever had to do, which is pretty
wow,
amazing. But
yeah.
some kids claim they got messages that the world is we're destroying our world, and they went home and told their parents, those things. They don't tell
Mm,
us how to fix it, just that we're destroying it.
mm, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
right. Well, that might be, the prime directive, as they call it, right? The non-interference universal
yeah,
law. That's the rumor, right? That's a
yeah.
thing. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, to switch topics for a minute. You
Mhm.
mentioned before that Stephen Greer, that you didn't really like him anymore, and that at one point he was doing really good work. So what's the deal with that?
Um, well, he, I don't really want to speak ill too much, but I think he's, some people call him a charlatan these days. I'm not going to say that, but
Hmm.
I believe that he kind of lost his focus, and he was an emergency room doctor. They make really good money, and he was in an area like a major area. I think I can't remember where, like L.A. or something like that. But I don't. Maybe it was
Uh-huh.
New York. I can't remember. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, when he first started, I do believe that he had great intentions, and it really was for some type of disclosure. And then as time went on, I believe that he decided to make himself more relevant. So I think there was a lot of enhancements. There's a lot of rumors. I don't want to get into them, but I know that it's become a cottage industry for him. And but I will tell you this: when people like Jonathan, for one, Michael Herrera for another. When they see him from the outside, I'll put it this way, and it happened to me as well. Back in 2011, when I started my show, I said, "Oh, a doctor. This guy is, legit. Must be legit. I mean, a doctor's taking this seriously." And I'll get a
Mm-hmm.
hold of him. And at the time, he was too busy to be on my new show. It was a new show,
Uh-huh.
and so then I started, just hearing the grumblings from the UFO field in general. He has this thing called CE5 where, they would, summon UFOs in. And my producer actually went to a couple of those, and they, she was saying that they would call everything a UFO, whether it was a satellite or, and then there was a day, this is pretty hilarious. There was a day that it was overcast and raining. So they were in the living room and they said, "Oh, the UFO has landed. It's in the barn, in the farmyard out here." This is in upper state New York.
Uh-huh.
And so, but you can't see it. It's invisible. I mean, so they're really going out,
Okay.
and she's
Yeah.
with someone, and they're going, "Let's get out of here," or whatever it was. But so yeah, he's kind of gone down that road, and there's and he's made a lot of films, but I don't think he probably still has good intentions, but I think he's focused. When you start focusing on making money with this topic, because no one makes money on it,
Mhm.
but when people figured they're just going to make money on it, so now he's charging, for supposedly at a UFO event. He claimed that there was an invisible UFO like in the parking lot or something like that, and supposedly was charging people to stand with him and take a selfie in the UFO, which wasn't really there. So it's interesting.
So some questionable stuff.
Yeah, and I also talked to someone that went to one of his conferences, and he had these big muscled armed guards go up to the door and block the door so nobody could leave during his conference. That's pretty scary right
Hmm.
there. So yeah, yeah,
That's not cool. So yeah, he's an interesting figure because it seems like he really did have, he does have really interesting witnesses, and his books and the documentaries present a lot of evidence. So see, that's my thing. Like I'm always in it for what evidence is there.
yeah,
So in a sense, like I've seen the evidence, that he's put together in his projects, and it's like I really appreciate that because um, it really helps, the field a lot. And but then I see in the UFO community that people have controversial opinions about him and whatnot. So I'm always curious what someone's take is. It's almost like, but so thanks for sharing that.
yeah.
Because that had
I think he
piqued my
probably still
interest.
does have good intentions, but unfortunately, he has to make money out of it. And whenever that happens, it's hard to trust everything. But he still does have the attraction of getting some really good witnesses because, like I said, on the outside, if you were looking into, like, I have some story to tell, I want to tell someone, "Oh, there's a doctor, and what is, I can get a hold of him, and he must be credible," and all that. So I think
Yeah,
that's how those people reach out to him.
yeah, right. So that's good to know. Um, yeah, so I it's been really great to meet you. Thank you for agreeing to come on. I know that I have a really small channel, but
That's all right.
I've sort of found my yeah.
We all do in the beginning, and that plays no part in why I'm here. So yeah,
Yeah, it means a lot, and it's funny how fast the time goes, and
it always does. Yeah,
you know, it does, yeah. So yeah, it would be awesome if we could do it another time when when the time is right,
sure.
and that would be nice to if we could make it a somewhat periodical thing as long as you have the time.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, that there's definitely probably, and you probably know this from all your experience. There's got to be a value to like continuing the conversation on down the road, right? With like the same guest.
Yeah, I do that a lot. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you for blessing my channel here, honestly.
Thanks.
Because you've done really great work and just honest work over there, and talked with a lot of very important and interesting people to get a perspective and kind of see everything that there is in the UFO topic.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate it. And yeah, there's so many different places we could have gone with the convo, but it went to some really good parts wherever it needed to go. And there's so much more I'd want to talk to you about, like more maybe people that you've spoken with and different angles. So thanks for it all. Is there, in terms of us staying in touch, is there, you said that you might be able to talk to Mike D'Antonio.
Marc.
Sorry, is it
Yeah.
Mike or
Marc?
Mark?
Yeah.
It's Mark.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, my
Marc
website,
D'Antonio.
basically podcastufo.com. All the contact information's there and everything. And there's also a newsletter that I send out once a week to people to let them know. I have a really, really good blogger that looks into all these historic cases and has for about 4 or 5 years on my website. So every week we have a new, fresh blog about some type of historic case. This one in particular this week is about one that happened in the 1600s in Europe. So what people saw in the sky and all that. So yeah, the UFO is not since 1947. It goes way back sometimes, historically.
Yeah, super interesting. I saw something recently, some research on the airships of the 1897.
Yep.
That's pretty compelling stuff.
Yeah.
Like Thomas Edison apparently had to write a letter, like an official letter, being like, "It's not from me."
Oh, I didn't ever hear that. That's
That's
interesting. Wow. Yeah.
I heard that from Linda Zimmerman. I was listening to her podcast because I live in the area where with the Hudson Valley
Oh.
and all that.
Yep.
So it's very interesting to me. I read her book.
Well,
and
you should
whatnot,
come to Pine Bush. We do that conference. It's in June this year. I'm going to be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and Linda's
I
always there.
do
She's
that.
wonderful.
Nice. Yeah, I really like her research and
yep.
Yeah,
she's
so
great.
She seems like she's really cool too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So awesome, man. Anywhere that you would want to point people to go?
Well, the
check out your
YouTube channel is probably the easiest. So if you just go to YouTube and you punch in either Martin Willis or Podcast UFO, either one, you'll get the channel. And not a ton of subscribers, but it's getting up toward the 30,000. I look at some of these people that have, 3 million subscribers, or something like that. But anyway, it's all good, and it's an easy way to watch the show live, and it's always on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yep.
Tonight, yeah. I mean, the quality is great. You've got the quality of the guest is excellent from what I've seen, and I'm just starting to discover it now. So it's been great to talk to you. So one more question.
Yep.
After all this, talking to almost 600 people, what do you think is going to happen in the next year or in the future in general?
Well, according to Lou Elizondo, who is he's been on my show a few times. He's one of the people that, well, he claims he worked at the Pentagon, for ATIP or OSWAP. I can't remember which one. There's so much controversy about that, but according to him, he says that this coming year there's going to be a lot revealed. Now, I don't know if that's so or not, but he basically said, I haven't lied to you yet out there. You just watch what's going to happen in 2024. So if so, hold on to your hats. But I don't know. We'll just see what happens.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, we don't know, but I think it'll be good. Just gonna take some time.
Yep.
Well, yeah. Thanks so much for coming, Martin.
You bet. Thank you.
It's been real nice to meet you, and I will talk to you soon.
You bet. All right. Take care.
All right. Have a great day. Good luck with your show tonight
Yeah.
and the rest of your research and everything.
Thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate you.